Welcome to Lavender Town Radio, where shadows whisper and every story hides a darker truth. Tonight, let me take you deeper into the world of Pokémon you were never meant to see.
My name is Lila. I'm a first-year art history major at Goldenrod University, and like every other first year, I was completely broke. Goldenrod is a city of opportunity and dreams, but it's also a city of cutthroat rental prices. I spent weeks searching for a place, my spirit sinking with every cozy apartment, meaning a closet, that cost as much as a semester's tuition. And then I found it. A misplaced ad on an old bulletin board. Room for rent, city center, affordable. Affordable was an understatement. It was unreasonably cheap. My roommate Chloe and I went to see it. It was a small apartment on the third floor of an old brick building, tucked away in an alley most people didn't know existed. It was small, the walls were a bit yellowed, but it had 2 bedrooms and a window that looked out onto another brick wall. To us, it was a palace. Mr. Gable, the landlord, was a thin man with shifty eyes. The rent is low because the building's a bit old, he mumbled, keys jingling in his hand. And, it can be a little noisy. Thin walls. We didn't care. We signed the lease on the spot, overjoyed to have found a sanctuary in this expensive concrete jungle. We thought we were lucky. Innocence is a precious thing. My roommate said our apartment was haunted. I told her she was crazy. I should have listened. The first night was a mess of cardboard boxes and cold pizza. We fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. And at around 3 a.m., I was woken up. It started softly, a muffled mumbling. I thought it was the neighbor's TV. But then it grew louder. A man's voice, thick and furious, like grinding gravel. A woman's voice, high and sharp like shattered glass, answering him. They were arguing. "What did you do?" the man's voice roared. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," the woman's voice sobbed. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere at once, yet it was so close, as if they were right in the next room. Chloe ran into my room, her face pale. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. "It's just the neighbors," I said, trying to sound calm. Mr. Gable said the walls were thin. But then the argument turned violent. I heard the sound of something smashing. The woman's crying turned into a terrified scream. And then a final sound, a choked-off shriek, followed by a wet thud. And then silence. A heavy, awful silence that was worse than any noise. We held each other, trembling, until the sun came up. The next morning, Chloe was packing. She said, "I don't care if the walls are thin, Lila. That wasn't a normal fight. That was something else. I'm going home. You should come with me." "I can't," I said, and the truth in those words was bitter. I had nowhere else to go. She left me alone in the silent apartment, with half the rent unpaid and a fear that was beginning to take root in my heart.
The last family who lived here didn't move out. They were carried out in bags. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a residual haunting, a psychic phenomenon where strong emotions record themselves onto a location. A classic ghost story. Scary, but livable. I told myself that for the next 3 nights. Every night at the same time, the horrific play would repeat itself. The argument, the crying, the scream, the thud, and the silence. I started investigating. I knocked on neighbors' doors. Most of them slammed the door in my face. An old woman downstairs just looked at me with pity. "Don't be curious, child," she said. "Some sounds are best left alone." Their avoidance only made me more determined. I went to the Goldenrod Library, burying myself in the microfilm archives of old newspapers. I searched for the building's address, and I found it.
An article from 5 years ago. The headline was short: Family Tragedy on Elm Alley. The article told of a couple, Marcus and Elena Anderson, who lived in apartment 3B, my apartment. They'd been having financial and marital problems. One night, neighbors heard a loud argument, followed by silence. The police found Elena beaten to death. Marcus was found in the bedroom, having taken his own life. A tragedy, a murder-suicide, and I was hearing a replay of it every single night. The knowledge brought no peace. It made everything worse. Now the voices had names. The screams had faces. The monster in my walls wasn't a ghost. It was a victim. I was trapped. The deposit was paid, and I couldn't afford to go anywhere else. I bought the best noise-canceling headphones I could find, but I could still hear it. A low vibration that came through the pillows and filled my skull. I realized the sound seemed to be concentrated in one place, the shared wall between the living room and the closet in my bedroom. That wall looked newer than the others, painted a bright, clean white, as if trying to hide something. One night, after the horrific play had ended, I gathered my courage. I knocked lightly on the wall. It gave a low, hollow thump. I used a kitchen knife to pry away a loose piece of the baseboard. Behind it wasn't brick, but a thin sheet of plywood, and behind the plywood was a space. With my heart hammering, I shone my phone's flashlight inside. The space was a section of the wall cavity no bigger than a shoebox, and in it, huddled in the far corner, was the source of my horror. It wasn't a ghost. It was a living creature. A small pink Pokémon with large ears and its eyes squeezed shut. A Whismur. It was trembling, and real tears were streaming from its eyes. It looked terrified and alone. And then I understood. Whismur absorbs sound. This one, probably trapped in the wall during the repairs after the murder, had been there on the night of the tragedy. It had absorbed it all. The screams, the fear, the anger, the pain, and now, like a person with PTSD, it was reliving that trauma every night, replaying the horrific sounds it had swallowed. It wasn't a monster. It was a victim, just like the Andersons. My compassion overrode my fear. I didn't call anyone. I thought I could help it. The ghost in my apartment started to sound exactly like me. I began its therapy. I opened a slightly larger hole in the plywood, enough to slide in food and water. I spoke to it through the wall in a soft, soothing voice. And it worked. For 2 nights, silence returned. I slept a deep, undisturbed sleep for the first time in weeks. I thought I had healed it. I thought I had done a good thing. On the 3rd night, the sounds returned. But this time, they were different. They weren't the voices of the Andersons. No, Mom, I'm fine. Just a little tired. Yes, I promise I'm eating. It was my voice. It was a perfect recording of the phone call I had with my mother that morning. I sat there, frozen, listening to myself talk from inside the wall. Then another sound, Chloe's voice. I don't care if the walls are thin, Lila. That was something else. It was replaying my own memories. It wasn't just a broken tape recorder anymore. It had learned to record. It had learned from me. The horror became intensely personal. The Whismur was no longer just reliving its own trauma. It had begun seeking new sounds, new emotions to absorb, and the only source was me. It started playing back the worst sounds. My sobs on the night Chloe left, the sound of me arguing with my father on the phone, my groans of frustration when I messed up an essay. It was taking my most vulnerable moments and throwing them back in my face. It was provoking me. It wanted me to scream. It wanted me to cry. It wanted me to create more food for it. My apartment had become an acoustic torture chamber, custom designed for me. It fed on sound. To survive, I had to learn to be silent. I almost broke. I stopped talking for days, afraid that any word I spoke would become a weapon against me. I communicated only by scribbling on a whiteboard. I knew I had to do something. The Whismur was growing stronger, feeding on my misery. And then, one night, it evolved. A low, resonant roar shook the apartment. The plywood wall cracked. A Loudred, much bigger and more intimidating, stared out at me from the darkness of the wall cavity. And it opened its mouth. This time, it wasn't an echo. It was a sound storm. The entire Anderson tragedy was unleashed at once, at a deafening volume. The screams, the crashes, the crying, all blended into a single wall of auditory madness. The furniture in my room vibrated. The glass in the window cracked. I fell to the floor, clamping my hands over my ears, screaming silently. And that's what I realized. Screaming wouldn't work. Fear wouldn't work. I was giving it exactly what it wanted. If it fed on the sound of pain, I had to give it the opposite. I staggered to my feet, my head pounding. I went to my old record player. My hands trembled as I placed a vinyl on the turntable. It was a classical album, The Gentle Nocturnes of Chopin. I turned the volume all the way up. Music filled the room, a melody of peace and beauty fighting against the soundstorm of hatred. The Loudred roared, confused. It couldn't absorb this sound. It had no emotion, no pain. It was just harmony. I started to speak, not to scream. I talked to it, my voice soft but firm. I said, "It's over now. The Andersons are at peace. You don't have to hold on to their pain anymore. You can be free." It snarled, but its roar was weaker. The melody was calming it. I moved closer, holding out my hand. "Come on out. No one is going to hurt you." The Loudred looked at me, and in its eyes, I didn't see malice. I saw an infinite weariness. It had been carrying the weight of that tragedy for so long. Slowly, it crawled out of the wall cavity. I took it to the Pokémon Center the next day. Nurse Joy said it was the worst case of acoustic trauma she had ever seen. They would care for it, help it learn to release those trapped sounds safely. I moved out of that apartment immediately. Mr. Gable, upon hearing my story, was so horrified that he gave me back my deposit and then some. I'm in a new apartment now. It's bright, spacious, and most importantly, quiet. But I've changed. I'm no longer afraid of noises in the night. I'm afraid of the silence, because I know that in the silence, the most painful echoes can still be heard. And I know that sometimes the only way to beat a monster isn't to scream louder than it, but to find a song of your own.
The signal fades, but the darkness lingers. This was Lavender Town Radio. Return, if you dare, because the next story may be your last.